Nathan Cross stood alone on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel, watching the Viridian homeworld spin below him like a jewel turning in sunlight. The planet gleamed with cities made of crystal and glass, towers that caught the light and threw it back into space in waves of white and blue. Between the cities, vast forests spread across the continents, their trees glowing soft purple at night. 3 years had passed since Nathan first came to this place. 3 years since he met her. He was not a young man anymore. His face showed the lines that came from stress and difficult choices. His dark hair had gray at the temples now. He had served Earth's military for 20 years before becoming a diplomat, and the transition had not been easy. War was simpler than politics. In war, you knew who your enemy was. In diplomacy, sometimes the enemy was compromise itself. The observation deck was empty except for Nathan. Most of the crew was below, working on routine tasks that kept the diplomatic ship running. Nathan preferred to be alone with his thoughts, though his thoughts were not always kind to him. He had come to the observation deck to remember, though remembering hurt. 3 years ago, Earth had joined the Galactic Council. For centuries, humans had looked to the stars and wondered if anyone was out there. When they finally found the galactic community, they discovered it was vast, complex, and largely indifferent to a young species from a small blue world. The Galactic Council had accepted Earth as a member, but barely. The Council saw humans as rough, crude, too young to understand the subtleties of intergalactic politics. Nathan had been chosen as humanity's chief, liaison to the Viridian royal house. The Viridians were one of the Council's oldest member species. They had advanced technology, centuries of cultural refinement, and a reputation for being calm and logical. They were the opposite of humans in nearly every way. Nathan's superiors thought he was the right choice for the job because he was controlled, methodical, and careful. They had no idea what would happen when he met Princess Lyra. The first time Nathan saw her, she was waiting in the formal receiving chamber of the royal palace. Lyra was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that shimmered between blue and violet depending on how the light touched her. Her eyes were enormous and held a kind of curiosity that Nathan recognized immediately. She was not wearing the heavy formal robes that the other Viridian nobles wore. She wore something simpler, more practical. Later, Nathan would learn that she had removed the formal clothes the moment the official ceremony ended. "Commander Cross," she had said, extending her hand in a gesture of greeting that the Viridians had adopted from human custom. "I have read everything that has been written about Earth. I want to know if it is true that humans can feel fear and still choose to act, that they do not require complete certainty before they move forward." Nathan had taken her hand, and in that moment, he had felt something shift in his chest. He had no name for it then. He would not understand it until much later. Over the following weeks and months, Nathan found himself spending more time with Lyra than with his official duties. She would send messages asking him to explain some aspect of human culture or history. He would suggest meetings to discuss Earth's customs. Soon they were meeting not because of official necessity, but because they both wanted to. They would walk through the palace gardens, and Nathan would tell her about the oceans on Earth, how they were vast and dangerous and beautiful. Lyra would tell him about Viridian philosophy, about the importance of balance and order. But the court did not approve. Nathan began to notice the cold looks from Lyra's advisors, the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered a room. The Viridian nobles saw him as unsuitable, as crude and short-lived. What was the point of a royal princess spending time with someone who would be dead in 80 years? The Viridians lived for 300 years or more. A human life was barely more than a flash in the darkness. On Earth, Nathan's superiors were equally unhappy. Messages came to him marked urgent. He was to reduce his time with the princess. He was creating political complications. He was damaging human relations with the council. He was causing problems for diplomatic negotiations. The messages grew harsher, the demands more specific. Nathan was instructed to end his private meetings with Lyra. He was told his behavior was unprofessional. Nathan had never disobeyed a direct order. He did not start then. He had sent Lyra a message explaining that his official duties required him to focus on broader diplomatic matters. He could no longer spend personal time with her. Their meetings must end. The words were cold and formal. He had written them knowing they would hurt her, knowing that she would understand exactly what he was doing and why. For 3 years, he had maintained this distance. When he saw her at official functions, he was polite but distant. When she sent messages, he responded with formal replies that addressed political matters but nothing personal. When she invited him to events, he declined. He watched her from across crowded rooms and saw the light fade from her enormous eyes. He watched her turn away from genuine connection and back toward the rigid duties of her position. Nathan told himself he was being noble. He was protecting her from the harm that would come if a Viridian princess became too attached to a human man. He was doing what was right, what was necessary, what was wise. But in the darkness of his quarters at night, he knew the truth. He was a coward. He was running from something he wanted with his entire being because that wanting frightened him. The observation deck was quiet. Far below, the Viridian cities gleamed with evening light. Nathan placed his palm against the cool transparency of the viewport and closed his eyes. He had made his choice 3 years ago. He had chosen duty over desire, responsibility over love. He had told himself this was the correct decision. But as he stood alone in the darkness, watching the planet turn beneath him, Nathan wondered if he had simply chosen a different kind of pain. One that was slower and quieter and perhaps more terrible because it had to be endured alone. The message arrived on Nathan's personal terminal early in the morning. The formatting was official, stamped with the seal of the High Chancellor himself. Nathan's first thought was that something had gone wrong on the council. His second thought was that this was about something else entirely. The summons requested Nathan's presence at the royal palace immediately. The message did not explain why. It did not mention Lyra. It was signed by Chancellor Morov, a Viridian official who had never shown any particular interest in human matters. Nathan read the message 3 times, searching for hidden meaning. Diplomacy was about reading between the lines, about understanding what was not said. He dressed in his formal uniform, the one that displayed his rank as commander and his position as Earth's chief liaison. The uniform was blue and gray, simple and practical, nothing like the elaborate formal dress that the Viridian nobility wore. Nathan looked in the mirror and saw a tired man staring back at him. He had grown older in 3 years. The decision to stay away from Lyra had worn on him in ways he could not fully explain. The transport ship carried him from the diplomatic vessel down to the Viridian surface. As Nathan descended through the atmosphere, he watched the planet grow larger. The crystal cities caught the sunlight. The purple forests spread across the land like veins. Nathan had visited this world many times in official capacity. He knew the routes between the important buildings. He knew the protocols and the ceremonies. What he did not know was why the High Chancellor wanted to see him. The palace was enormous, a structure that had been built over centuries and expanded many times. Its walls were made of polished crystal that seemed to shift between colors depending on the angle of the light. Servants in formal dress guided Nathan through corridors he had not walked in months. They passed through gardens where he had once walked with Lyra, pointing out the different plants and explaining their uses in Viridian medicine and art. Nathan did not allow himself to think about those walks. Not now. He kept his mind focused on the present moment, on the question of why he had been summoned. The servant brought him not to an official chamber, but to a private room. Nathan's heart tightened. This was not normal protocol. Official meetings with council members took place in formal halls with witnesses and recordings. Private meetings meant something else entirely. Nathan entered the chamber and saw Lyra waiting for him. She was wearing formal royal dress, a long garment of deep blue that seemed to be made of light itself. Her hair was arranged with silver threads woven through it, a sign of her status as princess heir. She was more beautiful than Nathan remembered, but also more distant, enclosed in a kind of careful control that made his chest ache to see it. There were new lines around her enormous eyes. She had lost weight. The vibrant energy that had filled her 3 years ago had been replaced by something more measured and sad. When she saw Nathan, she stood. She did not move toward him. She simply stood and looked at him with those vast eyes that had once looked at him with such unguarded warmth. "I sent them away," Lyra said. "The guards, the servants, the advisors. They were unhappy about it, but I have the authority to demand privacy when I wish it." Nathan did not know what to say. He had prepared himself for an official meeting with the High Chancellor. He was not prepared for this. "Why did you stay away?" Lyra asked. Her voice was quiet but steady. "If you no longer cared for me, if our friendship meant nothing, you could have transferred to another station. You could have gone back to Earth. You could have left. But you stayed here, close enough to see me at official gatherings. I have watched you watch me. I have felt your eyes on me from across crowded rooms. So I ask you directly now, why did you stay away?" Nathan wanted to give her the diplomatic answer. He wanted to speak about protocols and cultural differences and the impossibility of their situation. But looking at her, seeing the pain beneath her composed exterior, he knew she deserved something more honest than that. "I stayed away because I thought it was what was right," Nathan began. "I thought that by removing myself from your life, I was protecting you. The court resented your time with me. My superiors said I was damaging diplomatic relations. I convinced myself that distance was the only honorable choice." Lyra listened but did not interrupt. "I told myself that a human and a Viridian could never truly build something lasting." Nathan continued, "I am short-lived. You live for centuries. I come from a harsh world that made me into something rough and crude. You'd come from a world of elegance and refinement. I thought that by staying away, I was protecting you from a future where heartbreak was inevitable." Lyra's expression did not change, but Nathan saw her hands tighten slightly at her sides. "But I could not leave," Nathan said. "I stayed on the station because leaving would have meant never seeing you again. And I discovered that living near you while refusing to be in your life was a kind of torture. So you are right. I stayed away, but I stayed." The moments stretched between them. Outside the chamber, Nathan could hear the sounds of the palace. Servants moving through corridors. The hum of the climate controls. But in this room, there was only silence. Then the alarms began. They were soft at first, just a low sound that Nathan's trained ear recognized immediately as a warning system. Then they grew louder, more urgent. Red lights began to flash in the corridors outside the chamber. Lyra's composed expression shattered. She moved toward the communication panel on the wall. A voice came through, speaking in Viridian. Nathan understood enough to know that it was urgent. Something about an unidentified fleet. Something about a threat to the system. Lyra's entire body went rigid. She turned to look at Nathan, and he saw fear in her eyes for the first time. "The royal family is being evacuated," she said, already moving toward the door. "The defense fleet is mobilizing. You must return to your vessel immediately." Nathan wanted to say something, to ask her to stay, to finish the conversation. But he knew there was no time. The palace was coming alive with activity. Guards rushed past them. Officials moved with urgent purpose. "Go," Lyra said without looking back. "Go now." Nathan left the chamber and moved quickly through the palace corridors. Behind him, he could hear Lyra's voice giving commands to her staff. The woman he had tried so hard to forget was slipping away from him again, pulled into a crisis that neither of them had anticipated. As Nathan made his way back to his transport, he looked up at the sky. There were new lights there, the gleam of unfamiliar ships entering Viridian space. Something was coming, something that would change everything. Nathan was back on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel within an hour. The ship was designed for peaceful negotiations and cultural exchange, not for military conflict. It had minimal weapons, minimal armor, minimal tactical capability. Around it, the Viridian defense fleet was mobilizing, their sleek military vessels moving into formation. The communication channels were crowded with traffic. Nathan listened as Viridian commanders began coordinating their response. The unidentified fleet had been identified as the Xylar Hegemony, a spacefaring empire that had a reputation for aggression. They had not yet fired weapons, but they had broadcast a message to the Viridian government. Surrender or be conquered. Submit to Xylar rule or watch your world burn. The Viridian commanders responded with controlled calm. They were experienced military officers. They had faced conflicts before, though not for a very long time. The Viridian fleet was formidable, but it was becoming clear that the Xylar force was significantly larger. Early estimates suggested the Xylar had a 3-to-1 advantage in numbers. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session. Nathan watched as the council members debated the situation. Some suggested immediate negotiation. Others proposed that the Viridians accept certain territorial losses in exchange for peace. The council representative from a species called the Veloci made a long speech about the importance of accepting reality and working within its constraints. The message was clear. The council would not fight for the Viridians. This was their problem to solve. Nathan felt something hard crystallize in his chest as he watched the council work. This was what he had been part of for 3 years. This was the galactic community that Earth had joined with such hope. A community that would offer friendship only when that friendship was easy and cost nothing. He left the bridge and went to his private quarters. The walls were bare except for a few images from Earth. A photo of snow-covered mountains. A picture of the ocean. Nothing personal. Nathan's life had become as empty as his quarters. He placed a priority call to Earth's military command. The communication lag was significant, but not insurmountable. He explained the situation clearly. The Viridians were under attack. The Galactic Council would not help. Humanity had an opportunity to prove what kind of species it was. The response from Earth was skeptical. Earth's resources were limited. The Xylar hegemony was a known force, undefeated in direct conflict. Sending human ships to defend the Viridians was a massive risk. The military commanders wanted to know if Nathan understood the implications of what he was requesting. Nathan did understand. He knew it could be a disaster. He knew that human ships might be destroyed, that human soldiers might die. He knew that if the Xylar defeated the human fleet, it would damage Earth's standing in the Council irreparably. But he also knew something else. He knew what it meant when the Council turned away from a member species in danger. He knew what it meant when leaders made speeches about accepting reality instead of fighting to change it. He knew that humanity had to prove, in the first true test of its membership in the galactic community, what kind of allies humans could be. Nathan made his argument with intensity and clarity. He told the command structure that Earth had joined the galactic community not as conquerors, but as partners. The Viridians had shown humanity respect when Earth was unknown and unproven. They had welcomed humans into their world and their council. Now, in the first real test of that partnership, humans had the chance to prove they were worthy of that respect. He told them that humanity came from a world that tried to kill it every day. Humans had learned to be fast, adaptive, willing to take risks that other species considered suicidal. Humans had learned to value loyalty and sacrifice. If humanity did not stand with the Viridians now, when would they ever stand with anyone? There was a long silence. Then authorization came through. Nathan was cleared to bring the available human fleet to Viridian defense. The fleet was smaller than the Xyla force, but it was fast and well-equipped. Nathan immediately began coordinating with the Viridian commanders. The human ships began their approach to the Viridian system 30 hours later. There were 12 human vessels in total, fast frigates and a single larger destroyer-class ship that would serve as the flagship. Nathan took command from his position aboard the flagship. Around them, the vast Viridian fleet was preparing for battle. The Xyla fleet was positioned in orbit around Viridian space. When the human ships appeared, the Xyla commander must have assumed they were additional Viridian forces. When the human vessels began their attack run, the Xyla fleet adjusted its formation to meet this new threat. The battle was unlike anything Nathan had expected. The Xyla ships were larger and more heavily armored. They had more firepower, but the human ships were faster and more maneuverable. They were piloted by humans who had learned from centuries of warfare that survival often meant doing the unexpected. Moving in ways that defied conventional tactics, the human ships struck at the Xyla fleet from multiple angles simultaneously. They moved with an aggression that seemed reckless to Viridian sensibilities. The Xyla commanders responded with measured, logical tactics. This was their mistake. Measure and logic could not match human willingness to accept danger in exchange for tactical advantage. One of the human frigates flew directly toward a Xyla battleship, firing continuously. Nathan knew what was about to happen. He watched on the tactical display as the frigate took massive weapons fire in return. The ship's hull was breached in 3 places. The shields failed. The vessel's structure began to come apart. But before it died, that frigate fired a final volley that disabled one of the Xyla battleship's weapon systems. The human crew knew they were going to die. They did it anyway. They made their sacrifice count for something. 30% of the human frigate's crew died in that engagement. Nathan felt each loss like a physical blow, but he continued to coordinate the battle. The Viridian fleet, seeing human ships willing to die for this fight, moved with newfound aggression. The Viridian commanders understood then what humanity brought to this galaxy. It was not superior technology. It was not greater numbers. It was the willingness to stand and fight even when the odds were terrible, and to make that fight count. The battle raged for 6 hours. Nathan's flagship took heavy damage. The bridge was hit by enemy fire. Hull breaches spread through 3 decks. Nathan was thrown across the command center, his body crashing into a wall. Pain exploded through his ribs. He tasted blood, but he continued to coordinate the attack. The human and Viridian forces pressed the Xyla fleet back. The Xyla commander watched as his numerical advantage crumbled in the face of an enemy willing to sacrifice everything. Finally, recognizing a losing situation, the Xyla fleet broke formation and began a tactical retreat. Within hours, the Xyla ships had withdrawn from Viridian space. The battle was over. Humanity had proven itself. Nathan sat in the ruins of the bridge, surrounded by wounded crew members and dead bodies. The pain in his ribs was terrible. His left side was burned from a fire that had swept across the bridge. But he was alive. And somewhere below on the Viridian world, Lyra was alive too. The Viridian medical facility was unlike anything Nathan had experienced in human hospitals. The rooms were filled with light, and the equipment seemed to work in harmony with the body rather than against it. Nathan's severe burns had been treated with technology that humans had not yet developed. The fractures in his ribs were being healed by something between medicine and physics, a process that was painless but felt strange against his skin. Nathan drifted in and out of consciousness for days. He dreamed of the battle, of the moment when the human frigate exploded, of the faces of the crew members who had died. He dreamed of Lyra, though he was not sure if she was real when she appeared, or simply a product of his injured mind. Then Nathan woke. And Lyra was there, sitting beside his medical pod. She was not wearing her formal royal dress anymore. She was dressed in simple clothes, and her hair was loose around her shoulders without the silver threads. She looked exhausted. There were dark marks under her eyes that suggested she had not slept in a long time. When she realized Nathan was conscious, tears began to fall down her face. She reached out and placed her hand against the transparent surface of the medical pod. "I thought you would die," she said. "I thought the pod could not repair damage that severe. I sat here for days wondering if you would wake up, and I was terrified that you would not." Nathan wanted to reach for her, but he could not move. He was still partially immobilized by the medical systems that were working to repair his body. He could only watch as Lyra cried, could only see the emotion that she had kept so carefully controlled for 3 years finally break free. "You came back," Lyra said. "You came back and you fought for my world. You risked everything. You almost died. Why would you do that? Why would you come back after you stayed away for so long?" Nathan's voice was hoarse, damaged by smoke inhalation. "Because I was wrong," he said simply. "I stayed away thinking I was protecting you. I thought distance was noble. But distance was cowardice. I could not live near you and not love you, so I tried to make myself stop. All I did was waste time." Lyra pressed her hand harder against the pod. "It took almost losing you to understand something," she said. "It took watching you almost die to finally break through the expectations of the court and the demands of my position. When they brought you here, burned and broken, I realized that protecting my royal status was not as important as protecting you." Nathan did not understand what she meant. Lyra continued speaking before he could ask. "3 years ago," Lyra said, "the moment after you sent me that first distance message, I made a decision. The royal scientists had been researching extended lifespan therapies for generations. They had achieved stable results that could extend Viridian life from our natural 300 years to much longer. I volunteered to undergo the procedure." Nathan's eyes widened. He understood immediately what that meant. "I did it because I wanted to meet you across the distance between our species," Lyra said. "I wanted to give myself more life so that I could have more time with you, if you ever changed your mind. If you ever came back. The procedure took months. The recovery took longer. But I did it. I chose to extend my lifespan so that a life with you might be possible." Nathan felt something inside him break open. For 3 years, he had been protecting her by staying away. But she had been working toward a future where they could be together. She had made a choice that transformed her entire life, all because she believed that someday he might change his mind. "I understand why you stayed away," Lyra continued. "The Viridian court looked down on humans. Your superiors looked down on Viridians. Everyone said we were impossible. So you tried to protect me by removing yourself from my life. But you're staying nearby. You're remaining in my orbit while refusing to touch my life. Prove something to me. You had not forgotten. You still cared. You were protecting me because you loved me, not because you wanted to abandon me." Nathan wanted to speak, but Lyra held up her hand to stop him. "There is something else you need to understand," she said. "The attack was not random. Viridian intelligence discovered that our government was preparing a treaty that would formalize human integration into the highest levels of council diplomacy and culture. The Xylar hegemony learned of this and attacked to prevent it. They did not want humanity to become an ally of the Viridians. They saw the combination of human and Viridian strength as a threat to their own influence." Nathan absorbed this information. The battle had not been random. It had been deliberately triggered to prevent the very alliance that he and Lyra represented. "So you proved something in that battle," Lyra said. "You proved that humanity is not an obstacle to Viridian civilization. You proved that humans are partners, willing to sacrifice everything for people who are not even their own species. You proved that humans have something more valuable than technology or power. You have loyalty. You have the capacity to care. You have the will to stand and fight for others without hesitation." Lyra leaned closer to the pod. "So now I ask you one final time, Nathan Cross. Will you stop running? Will you stop trying to protect me by refusing to love me? Will you stay? Not because it is easy. Not because it makes political sense. But because we choose each other?" Nathan, lying in a medical pod with burns covering his body and broken ribs that was still being repaired, said the only word that mattered. "Yes." Lyra's hand remained pressed against the pod, and Nathan pressed his own hand against the opposite side. They could not touch directly, but they could feel the warmth of each other's bodies through the transparent material. They had waited 3 years for this moment. They had made sacrifices that had seemed impossible at the time. But this moment, this simple yes, was worth all of it. The medical facility continued its work around them. The healing would take time. Humanity's place in the galactic community was still being determined. The Galactic Council was still debating what the human intervention meant and what precedents it set. But in this room, none of that mattered. There was only Nathan and Lyra, finally choosing each other across the vast distance that separated their worlds. 3 months passed. The wounds on Nathan's body healed slowly, the burns fading to faint scars across his left side. The broken ribs knitted together, stronger than before. Viridian medical technology was superior to anything Earth had, and Nathan found himself grateful for it every day. But more than that, he found himself grateful for Lyra's presence during every moment of recovery she read to him. She told him stories from Viridian history, tales of explorers who had traveled to distant worlds, of artists who had created beauty that lasted centuries, of philosophers who had asked the same questions about meaning and purpose that humans had always asked. In return, Nathan told her about Earth. He told her about the oceans that could swallow ships whole, about the winters that could freeze a person in hours, about deserts so vast that losing your way meant death. He told her about a world that tried to kill humans every day, and how humans had learned not to become killers in response, but instead to build communities and protect each other. "Your world made you fierce," Lyra said one evening as they sat together in the medical facility's recovery garden. "But it also made you capable of great kindness. I think that is why you stayed away. You were being fierce with yourself, trying to protect me from a danger that only you could see." Nathan reached over and took her hand. This was something that had been impossible 3 months ago. "I think I was afraid," he said. "I was afraid of the future. I was afraid of losing you when my time ended. I was afraid of the judgment we would face. So I chose a different kind of suffering, one where I could tell myself I was being noble." Lyra squeezed his hand. "And now?" "Now I am still afraid," Nathan said. "But I would rather face the fear with you than face it alone." The Galactic Council met in emergency session to address what was being called the Viridian intervention. Some council members praised humanity's courage and loyalty. Others expressed concern that Earth had not consulted the Council before military action was taken. There was debate about what precedents this set for future conflicts. Some species worried that humans were too aggressive, too willing to use force instead of seeking diplomatic solutions. Others argued that humanity had simply proven it could be trusted when trust was needed most. Nathan and Lyra attended the council sessions together. They walked into the great chamber hand in hand, making no effort to hide their bond. The sight of a human and a Viridian princess together, openly claiming each other, created waves of conversation throughout the chamber. Some council members were clearly outraged. Others seemed intrigued by what this union might represent. The High Chancellor, Morov, looked at Nathan and Lyra with an expression that was difficult to read. The Viridian official had summoned Nathan to the palace just before the attack. He had been the one to arrange that moment between Nathan and Lyra, though Nathan did not know this until much later. When Morov saw them together now, he simply nodded, a gesture that might have been approval. Opposition to their union came from the Viridian court. The High Council of Viridian nobility was divided on the matter. Some noble families insisted that a princess of the blood could not form a permanent bond with an alien, let alone a human. Such a union would weaken Viridian genetic lines. It would set a dangerous precedent. It would damage Viridian society if others followed suit. The debates were fierce and sometimes bitter, but support came from unexpected places. The younger generation of Viridian officials saw in Nathan and Lyra a symbol of something new, a bridge between worlds that could only exist if someone was willing to cross it. The humans on the diplomatic station were unanimous in their support. Many of them had friends in the Viridian military who had fought alongside them during the battle. Those bonds of shared sacrifice could not be broken by cultural prejudice. One evening, as Nathan and Lyra stood in the formal chambers of the royal palace, Lyra made an announcement to the assembled court. She would abdicate her position in the line of succession. She would no longer be Princess Heir of Viridian. Instead, she would establish a new office, a position dedicated to human Viridian cultural and diplomatic cooperation. She would work not as a royal figure bound by centuries of tradition and expectation, but as a bridge builder, someone who could move between two worlds and help them understand each other. The court erupted. Some Viridian nobles stood to protest. Others remained silent, understanding that this was a choice Lyra had the authority to make. The High Chancellor did not object. He seemed, in fact, unsurprised by her decision. Then Nathan made his own announcement. Earth would formally commit a permanent diplomatic and cultural mission to the Viridian people. Human scientists and Viridian scientists would collaborate on research. Human teachers would share human knowledge with Viridian institutions. Human artists would work with Viridian artists. And Viridian scientists, teachers, and artists would do the same on Earth. Nathan would lead this mission as Earth's permanent ambassador to the Viridian people. His role was no longer temporary or provisional. It was a permanent commitment. The Galactic Council seemed to understand what this meant. Humanity was not leaving. Humans were not a brief novelty that would fade. Humanity had chosen to build something lasting with the Viridian people. And the Viridians, in the form of their princess, had chosen to build something lasting with humans. Months later, Nathan and Lyra oversaw the construction of a facility that would serve as the headquarters for human Viridian cooperation. The building was designed by both species working together. It combined human practicality and efficiency with Viridian elegance and beauty. Walking through the structure, Nathan could see the spaces designed for science and research. He could see galleries for art and culture. He could see chambers for diplomatic work and teaching. He could see spaces designed for friendship and community. As they walked through the central chamber, Lyra asked Nathan one more question. "Do you still worry about the complications?" she asked. "About the future? About the ways this will be difficult?" Nathan considered the question honestly. "Yes," he said. "There will be complications. Our families will struggle with this. There will be prejudice and resistance. Your extended lifespan will still eventually end before mine, if Viridian medicine continues to advance. My human life will still eventually end, and you will need to learn how to live with loss. But I have learned that love is not about avoiding difficulties. Love is about choosing to face them together, rather than facing them apart. They stood at the viewport, looking out at the Viridian sky. The sunset painted the atmosphere in shades of purple and gold. Nathan's arm was around Lyra's waist. Her head rested on his shoulder. They were different species, from different worlds, carrying different lifespans and different histories. But in this moment, they were simply two people who had chosen each other. When choosing apart, it seemed easier and safer that Nathan thought about what it meant to be human. Humans came from a world that tried to kill them. Yet, they had learned not to become killers themselves. They had learned to protect the vulnerable. They had learned to love fiercely and without hesitation. They had learned that strength came not from power but from the capacity to care for others, to sacrifice for strangers, and to build connections across distances that seemed impossible to bridge. Among the stars, Nathan and Lyra had proven what humans could offer the galaxy. Not superior technology, not greater military power, but the will to reach across distance and say to another being, "I choose you." Not because it is easy, not because it is convenient, but because you are worth the difficulty, because you matter to me more than comfort or safety or the approval of those who say we cannot be together. The Viridian sky grew darker as evening deepened into night. The bioluminescent forests began to glow softly in the darkness. Nathan and Lyra remained at the viewport, watching the light grow in the world they now shared. Around them, the facility continued its work. Scientists collaborated on research. Teachers shared knowledge. Artists created beauty together. And above it all, in the great chamber where both humans and Viridians worked side by side, there was a growing understanding that when two beings from different worlds choose each other, something stronger than politics emerges. Something that had the power to change galaxies. Something that humans had always possessed, but that the stars had never seen before. The will to love without boundary, without hesitation, and without fear.